The morning started quiet, like most do. I moved slow, not 'cause I had to, but 'cause I earned the right. The kettle hissed gently as I made my tea. Earl Grey, 3 minutes steeped, no more. Gospel from the old radio filled the air, Mahalia humming, Trouble of the World, low and steady. The plants by the window drank in the sun, same way I drank in that stillness. My peace came in rituals. I caught the scent of grits and cornbread coming from the kitchen, familiar but not welcoming. That's Charmaine's doing, my daughter-in-law. Everything in this house got touched by her tone. Passive, sharp like ice under bare feet. "You're up," she said, without looking at me. "Didn't think you still had mornings in you." I smiled to myself and kept wiping down the counter I'd already cleaned. Mama always told me, don't let their words sit on your spirit. I'd learned the power of silence early, how it didn't mean weakness, just wisdom. "Breakfast's almost done," she continued. "Not that you'd be any help in the kitchen. Don't want you to strain something. That kitchen used to be mine, you know, before she got here, before I handed my son a key to the house and watched it turn cold, one room at a time. I didn't respond, just turned toward the laundry, noticing I'd left the dryer still running from the night before. A mistake, sure, but a small one. That was all she needed. "You left the dryer on again?" Her voice rose. "Electricity ain't free, Odessa. You do one thing around here and can't even do it right." The slap in her tone didn't sting as much as it used to. Still, I felt it. I turned back toward the hallway, her words following like smoke after fire. She stormed off down the hall, muttering, "Useless," under her breath, loud enough for me to hear. I stood still, hands shaking not from fear, but the kind of hurt you can't cry out loud. Then I heard it. The bathroom door slammed, a twist of the knob from the other side. Click. I walked over, slow, turned the knob, locked. "Charmaine?" I called out. No answer. Minutes passed, then hours. At first I thought it was a tantrum, a joke, something petty she'd undo before long. But the house stayed quiet. Her footsteps didn't come back. Just that closed door and the sound of my breath. I sat down on the toilet lid, hands on my lap. The last time I heard a lock click like that, I was 29. Arguing with my husband in the storage room out back. He didn't want me going to Mama's funeral, said it wasn't his business. Locked me in there till the next morning. I remember the way the light looked through the slats in the door, same way it looked now, under this one. Hours melted into silence, into dark. The first night, I didn't sleep. I just watched the light fade and rise again. By the second day, hunger came. Not just in my stomach, but in my thoughts. I hungered for something bigger than food, for my self-respect. The bathroom was plain, white tiles, blue rug, but in the corner, high on the sill, was a glass jar I'd forgotten. Inside it, a single peacock feather, dusty, faded. It used to shimmer with color. Now it looked tired, like me. I started talking to myself, not crazy talk, survival talk. "God, don't sleep," I whispered, "even when they shut the light on you." Mahalia stayed with me, even in my head. I hummed her low. "The Lord may not come when you call, but He's always on time." Time bent. I lost track of it, but my mind sharpened. I thought about all I'd done for this family, all I'd given, the money, the home, the patience. Then I remembered the papers, the ones I signed so my son could get the loan, so he and Charmaine could start fresh. My name on the deed, still there. They let me stay, but this was still my house. That thought sat up straight in my chest. Third day, she opened the door. Just like that. Didn't say nothing. Didn't look sorry. I stepped out, slow, quiet. She turned away, pretending like nothing had happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked at her, watched the way her eyes flinched when they met mine. "Got it," I said. That was all. In that silence, I realized something. She thought she locked me in, but really she'd locked herself out. Out of my kindness. Out of my forgiveness. I walked down the hall, past the photos she'd moved around, past the kitchen she called hers now, into my room, opened the top drawer. There they were, the papers, deed, signatures, dates. I picked them up with hands that didn't shake, looked at them like I was seeing gold. Got it, all right, I whispered, because next time, the door that closes won't be mine. The papers sat like ghosts on the kitchen table, yellowed edges, staples bent from age, ink just faded enough to remind me how long I'd been quiet. I spread them out slowly, careful, like handling scripture. My hands didn't shake, not anymore. I looked down and saw my name, right there, Odessa May Turner, printed neat, signed twice, dated the spring before my boy got married. I remembered that day, clear as the morning dew, me sitting across from Marcus at the bank, holding his hand, proud as a mama could be. I put my name on the line so he and that woman could buy this house. My house. Our house. And now I was the one eating cold meals and getting locked behind doors. They said I was useless, I whispered, but this house breathes my name through every wall. Each page I turned felt like peeling off a layer of something they'd tried to bury. I could feel Mama's voice inside me. If you can't outshout them, outthink them. I grabbed a pen and started scribbling on a yellow notepad. Not anger, strategy. Quiet, clean moves. That evening, the kitchen smelled of baked chicken and overdone sweet potatoes. We sat at the table, me, Marcus, and Charmaine. I looked at the food like it was dressed in lies. Charmaine scooped mashed potatoes onto my plate, smiling like we shared some secret joy. I hope you understand it was just a misunderstanding, she said, soft like syrup. I stared at my fork. I understand more than you think. Marcus wouldn't look up. His shoulders were hunched, like he was bracing for something. I'd raised him better than this silence. Sometimes silence ain't peace. It's the quiet before a decision. I reached for the salt, and that's when I saw it. An envelope from the bank tucked under a stack of mail on the counter. Addressed to me. Not them. Me. Charmaine's eyes flicked toward it. Quick. Nervous, then she looked away. So, she knew, and now, I knew she knew. I didn't say another word. I finished my meal, watched Marcus chew like the food had no taste, watched Charmaine sip her wine too fast. That envelope was the loudest thing in the room. Later that night, I called Loretta. We hadn't talked in a while, but church bonds don't fray easy. She used to do real estate back in the day, knew all the legal talk I didn't. You said your name's on the deed? She asked. Still is, I said. Black and bold. Well, baby, she chuckled. God's giving you the tools. Don't let guilt talk you out of justice. I pressed the phone closer. I ain't angry, Loretta. I'm awake. Next morning, I dug through drawers, old boxes, even my church bag from years ago. I found mortgage statements with my name, old emails I'd printed from Marcus when he begged for help getting the loan. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about dignity. About not letting them rewrite the truth. That peacock feather? I pulled it from the jar, wiped it clean with a damp cloth, and stood it tall in a vase. Let it remind me. I still got color, still got spine. At breakfast, I stirred my tea slow, like nothing had changed. You ever wonder, I asked Charmaine, what would happen if this house didn't belong to you? She laughed. Quick, loud, too loud. But mid-laugh, her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Marcus looked at her, then at me. He didn't say a thing. I finished my tea, set the cup down gentle. I'll be out this afternoon, I said, standing up. Got some papers to sign. Charmaine blinked. What kind of papers? I just smiled, grabbed my coat. The kind that remind folks where the foundation starts. I walked out calm, but inside, I knew this was the first door I'd close on my own terms. The rain started sometime after midnight. I could hear it drumming on the roof like a restless thought that wouldn't sit still. Thunder rolled low, crawling through the walls, shaking loose memories I'd tried to bury. I sat up in bed, the house too quiet, too full of things unsaid. The papers were still on the table in the next room, but tonight they didn't matter. What kept me awake wasn't what I owned, It was what I'd lost piece by piece over the years without noticing. Silence had been my best weapon for as long as I could remember. It kept me safe when words could get me hurt. But that night, silence felt heavy, like a locked door again. I thought about how it followed me everywhere, in my marriage, in motherhood, in this house that used to feel warm. It wasn't peace, it was punishment, and I had learned to live inside it. Lightning flashed through the curtains, lighting up the photo album on my dresser. I pulled it close, brushed off the dust. The smell of old paper carried me backward. I turned the first page, Marcus as a baby, cheeks full, eyes big and bright. My husband beside him, proud and tired. And me, smiling, unaware of what life was saving up to teach me. Funny how a photo can smile for you while life forgets to. A picture slipped out, falling to the floor. I reached for it and froze. It was the one I'd torn years ago, during an argument that still burned behind my ribs. Marcus's half was still smiling. Mine had been ripped away. My breath caught. I remembered that day, the first time I realized my boy had chosen someone else's comfort over my dignity. It was 2 years ago. I'd been admitted to the hospital with high blood pressure. Too many nights worrying about bills that weren't mine, words that cut too deep. Marcus showed up hours late, Charmaine in tow, smelling like perfume that didn't belong in hospitals. I was sitting there in that paper gown, feet cold against the linoleum. When I saw him, relief washed over me. For a second, I thought he came out of love. Then Charmaine opened her mouth. "She'll be fine," she told the nurse, not looking my way. "She just wants attention." I waited for Marcus to speak, to defend me. But he just looked down, quiet, fidgeting with his phone. I saw the boy I'd raised disappear in that silence. That day, something cracked in me. Not enough to break me down, but enough to make me different. Enough to never forget. I left the hospital with my medicine and a heart too sore to swallow any more pride. Now, sitting in the dim light of my room, thunder still rolling, I realized the pattern wasn't new. The neglect wasn't born in this house. It had roots. Years of small dismissals, quiet cuts, birthdays missed with flimsy excuses, little ways they taught me my place and how I learned to take it. "You trained me to be invisible," I whispered into the dark. "And I let you." The storm outside beat against the windows, almost in rhythm with my heartbeat. I reached for a yellow legal pad on the nightstand and started to write. Not letters, not poetry, records. Every memory that proved how they'd chipped away at me. Every legal detail Loretta had told me to note down. A timeline of neglect and ownership. A record of what was mine and what they tried to take. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. Each line I drew was a step back toward myself. I closed the album, set it aside, and looked at the torn photo one last time. I struck a match from the candle jar on the dresser and held the flame beneath it. The edges curled, blackened, then disappeared. Smoke lifted toward the ceiling, thin and quiet like forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. "I was never weak," I said under my breath. "I just believed loving you meant losing me." My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Loretta. I typed back, "Let's meet tomorrow." "I'm ready." The rain slowed, turning into a soft whisper on the roof. The thunder faded somewhere far off, but I could still feel its echo in my bones. I sat by the window, hands folded, watching water streak down the glass like veins of light. They thought silence was surrender, but they forgot who taught them to speak. I hadn't left that guest room in days. My legs felt stiff, my back ached, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I took my time standing up, straightening the quilt, smoothing the wrinkles out like I used to do when I was preparing a classroom before the bell. Order gave me peace. It also reminded me I still had control over something, even if it was just how I folded a blanket. When I opened the door, I heard clinking glasses and the faint sound of laughter. Charmaine's laughter, loud and sweet like syrup that hides the taste of poison. She'd invited people over again, without saying a word to me. The smell of bacon grease and vanilla candles filled the air, fighting for space. I stood at the edge of the living room, watching her glide between the kitchen and the table like she owned the sunlight. "Oh, Odessa," she said, voice dripping with fake surprise. Didn't know you were up. We're having a little brunch. Could you help with the dishes? You know where everything is. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the table, polished silverware, folded napkins, and a centerpiece she must have bought that morning. My photo, the one of Marcus and me at his graduation, was gone from the shelf, replaced by some store-bought quote about family. Marcus walked in then, fresh shirt, polished shoes, eyes fixed on his phone. He nodded at everyone except me. I studied him. That blankness, that trained invisibility. It used to break me. Now it just told me everything I needed to know. Charmaine's voice rose again, just loud enough for her guests. You sure move slow, Odessa. Maybe you should rest. Wouldn't want you lingering around like a sad ghost. The room chuckled politely, not knowing whether to laugh or leave. I set down the plate I was holding, wiped my hands, and turned to her. Ghosts don't haunt the living, I said, calm as church. They haunt the guilty. The laughter died right there. You could hear the refrigerator hum. Charmaine blinked, then smiled, brittle and bright. You really think you can talk to me like that in my house? I stepped closer, voice low but steady. You mean the house with my name on it? The one I helped build? Yeah, I think I can. Marcus looked up finally, torn between his wife's pride and his mother's truth. But as usual, he chose silence. Charmaine laughed again, the sound forced. You're too old to matter, Odessa. Sit down before you fall. I smiled then. Not kind, not cruel, just tired of pretending. Old don't mean finished, I said softly. And you're not ready. Her guests shifted in their chairs, murmuring something about needing to go. The party died faster than it started. After they left, I sat down at the table, placed a manila folder right in the center, and folded my hands. I talked to someone yesterday, I said, voice level. A lawyer. Just wanted to make sure I understood something. Charmaine's smirk wavered. Marcus frowned. Turns out, I continued, tapping the folder once, the name on this deed ain't what y'all think. Marcus stared, confused. Charmaine gave a quick laugh that didn't reach her eyes. You've been watching too many court shows, Odessa. I leaned back in the chair, looked between them both. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned the difference between quiet and blind. I stood, left the folder where it was, and walked toward my room. On the way out, I said over my shoulder, sometimes the silent one's the one building the loudest storm. When I reached my room, the sunlight had shifted through the blinds, striping the floor in gold and shadow. I sat at my small desk, pulled out the old journal I hadn't touched since the funeral. The leather cover felt soft, worn from time and tears. I opened it and began to write. James, I wrote to my late husband. They think I'm broken. But maybe I was just waiting. I see them now for who they are. And I see me again, too. I paused, listening to the faint murmur of voices from the other room. Charmaine's sharp tone, Marcus's quiet surrender. I kept writing. They mistake volume for power. They think being loud makes them right. I'll remind them that truth don't need a microphone. I set the pen down and closed the book. My reflection in the window looked older, yes, but also unshaken. I'd spent a lifetime holding my tongue, keeping the peace. That version of me died behind a locked door. Tomorrow, I won't raise my voice. I'll just raise the stakes. Before dawn broke, I was already awake. I heard voices, hushed, urgent, from the kitchen and the back porch. Charmaine and Marcus arguing, voices thin and sharp in the dark. I stayed silent, body still, listening like a jury in session. The sky had that heavy gray promise, like it knew storms were coming. I poured coffee slowly, feeling each drip mark time passing. People speak most honestly when they think you ain't listening, I thought. My heart tightened each time I heard Charmaine's voice thicken with resentment. She been up again. Who knows what she's plotting? Marcus tried to calm her. Let's just sit down and talk. But that tone, talk, sounded hollow. I carried the mug to the table. She appeared, hair done, face polished, unreadable. I placed the cup in front of me, waited, for what I didn't know yet. Marcus cleared his throat. Mama, Let's talk like grown folks." His voice was soft but desperate. The room contracted around me. They both leaned forward. I stayed still, letting them unravel themselves. Charmaine's eyes flicked toward me, challenge wrapped in her smile. She said, "We just need closure, Odessa. No more secrets." I watched her speech, waited until she swallowed. Then I spoke, low, measured. "If you think I'm here to beg, then y'all still don't know who raised who." Silence roared after that. Marcus's eyes widened. Charmaine's lips parted. She laughed, bitter. "You ain't got enough miles on you to disrespect mine," I said, unshaken, and walked away mid-sentence. Outside, the porch wood cool beneath my fingers. I stared at shadows, at the fence, at the peeling paint. The manila folder from yesterday was tucked in my bag, but I didn't need it now. My resolve pressed up from inside me. I called Loretta, not to cry, not to plead, to move. "Go ahead and file, quietly," I told her. She said nothing. I sensed her pride. I sat in my car afterward, looking at the lawn, at the house I built in memory and mortar. I reread the deed on my phone, the names in black and white, proof nobody could fake. I realized I never asked permission to act. I just needed to choose when. I thought, you don't warn folks twice who already laughed at the first word. Inside, my mother's voice echoed. Silence can be a prayer or a protest. The choice is yours. I stood, walked into my bedroom, found the brooch I wore on my wedding day. I pinned it to my coat, not for beauty, but as armor. I wrote a brief letter, folded it small, slipped it into my Bible. It said, "In case I don't come back to this house again." I looked in the mirror. My reflection older, yes, but fierce. And I thought, I was done explaining myself. Now, it was time for them to witness the rest. Loretta's backyard looked peaceful from the sidewalk. The grill smoking, kids running through bubbles, gospel songs drifting from the old radio on the porch. It should have felt safe. Loretta said this was just family, no drama. I told myself to believe her, just this once. I even brought my cobbler, still warm, the one that used to make folks line up with empty plates. But peace doesn't live long where lies take root. I saw them before they saw me. Marcus and Charmaine, walking up the driveway like they were stepping onto a stage. He had that polite grin he uses when he wants folks to think he's the good son. She had her sunglasses pushed up on her head, hair done too perfectly for a backyard cookout. They waved, they smiled, they hugged, like we'd never shared a word sharper than honey. When Charmaine spotted me, her smile didn't falter. "Odessa," she said sweetly, "you made it. I told Marcus I hoped you'd be strong enough to come. Strong enough." I bit the inside of my cheek and smiled back. "You know me," I said. "Takes more than whispers to keep me down." She blinked, the kind of blink that means she heard the knife under the velvet. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd started to shift. Folks laughed too hard, asked questions too soft. "You doing better now, Miss Odessa?" someone said. "Heard you was sick for a while." Another cousin leaned in, whispering, "Marcus said y'all had a misunderstanding. You okay now?" I could feel the room, the yard, dividing itself. One side curious, the other cautious. I'd been in church long enough to recognize a congregation choosing its preacher. Marcus floated between groups, pretending not to see me. I watched how he'd touch Charmaine's elbow when she spoke, a little cue, a signal. She was running the show, and he was letting her. When I realized what was coming, it was already too late to stop it. She was standing by the grill, a paper plate in one hand, holding court. "Y'all know how Mama O is," she said, laughing like she was sharing a cute secret. "She locked herself in the bathroom for 3 days, wouldn't eat a thing. We were so scared. Marcus almost called the police." Someone gasped. Another chuckled nervously. Charmaine leaned closer to her audience. Then she started saying we were stealing from her, threatening us with lawyers. Bless her heart. She just gets confused sometimes. Every eye turned toward me. The sound of the grill seemed to vanish. I looked around. People I'd fed, babysat, prayed with, all staring like they were watching a TV episode they didn't want to end. Loretta took a step forward, face red with anger. But I raised my hand. "Let her finish." Charmaine froze for half a second. then smiled wider. Oh, I didn't mean no harm, Miss Odessa. I just worry about you, that's all. We all do. Something in me snapped, not loud. Quiet, cold, final. I walked toward her. Each step felt heavier than the last, but steady. The crowd parted like they always do when truth shows up. I stopped at the table, close enough to smell the sweet sauce dripping from her plate. Charmaine, I said softly, you ever notice how you tell stories better when you're lying? She blinked. Excuse me? Before she could add another word, I brushed the plate from her hand. Ribs, beans, and cornbread scattered across the grass. The crash was louder than thunder. If you wanted attention, honey, I said, clear enough for everyone to hear, you should have auditioned for reality TV. Not my life. Gasps, murmurs, the scrape of folding chairs. For a moment, nobody breathed. Marcus looked pale, caught between fear and shame. One cousin mumbled, Lord, she done told the truth. Charmaine's mask cracked, her voice rising an octave. You're insane, she shouted. This is exactly why nobody wants you around. I smiled. Then I guess I'm finally free. I turned, picked up my purse, and started walking. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. Every step away from that table felt like reclaiming something I'd left behind years ago. On the porch, my old church shoes waited by the mat, scuffed leather, polished by habit. I looked down at them and thought about all the Sundays I'd worn those shoes to forgive people who didn't deserve it. Not today. I slipped them on, lifted my chin, and pushed open the gate. Loretta called after me, her voice breaking. Odessa, wait! I didn't turn around. There's a time to be gracious, I said, and a time to be done. The air was thick with smoke and silence. My feet carried me toward the street, sunlight glinting off the car hoods like mirrors reflecting my freedom. That was the last time I let someone else tell my story louder than I could live it. I woke with a knot in my chest. The aftermath of yesterday's showdown still echoed in my bones. Light trickled through the blinds, soft, hesitant. Outside, cars rolled down the street, children laughing in yards, neighbors beginning their Sunday routines. I paused at the window, watching Charmaine's car pull away with her purse over her shoulder. The timing felt deliberate, too neat, too staged. They walk around me like I'm already gone, I thought, sipping my coffee bitter and warm. I braced myself. Today, I wouldn't shrink. By midday, I sat in my yard, porch behind me, watching the neighborhood stir. Word travels fast in this block. I'd learned that. Then, LaShonda Reeve appeared at the gate, hesitant. She carried a plastic chair. She said, Ms. Odessa, I heard on the block, you might want to know what folks are saying. She paused, hands shaking. They say, you don't own the place anymore. My heart dropped. Neighbors looked over fences, whispered, pointed. Children glanced my way, phones came out, gossip spread like wildfire. Neighbors, folks I'd known for decades, avoided my eyes. Some crossed the street. The sunlight felt hot, oppressive. I stayed still, let them burn in their words. This is my story they're twisting, I thought. They've made me their rumor, not their mother. I didn't confront LaShonda, not yet. I let her words hang, let them sink in. Later, guests came. Charmaine's friends, cousins from out of town. Charmaine spoke loud enough for the yard. You know Miss Odessa just wrote checks, never built anything. She never did the work. That was ours. My name felt small in their mouths. Shame rose first, then something colder. I steadied myself and stood. You think I only wrote checks? I said softly. If check writing was weakness, you wouldn't be living here. Eyes widened. Murmurs ran. Charmaine's face flickered in betrayal and surprise. Marcus's jaw clenched. Silence pressed in. I retreated to my bedroom, a sanctuary. Door closed. I drew in deep breath. That peacock feather in its jar. I pulled it out, cleaned it, held it up to the light. It caught the sun, faint color returning. I wrote a note in my journal. I will not bow. Under soft lamplight, I plotted. The lawyer call still fresh in memory. A lien quietly filed. Evidence ready. Deed in hand. I whispered, "Let them try to smear me, but I'll stand in facts." Outside, laughter and conversation drifted through the walls. I sat, back against the headboard, knowing tomorrow they'd see. Either I'd rise, or I'd watch them burn under their own lies. Tomorrow they'll watch me rise, or watch me burn them with the truth. It was just a plain envelope, no name, no return address, just a time and an address scrawled in blue ink. Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. I held it up to the porch light like it might whisper something else. It didn't. But something about the handwriting made me pause. I didn't tell nobody. Just got in my car that evening and drove down to the old community center near East Pine, the one that always smelled like floor wax and old coffee. I parked in the back. Quiet. Out of sight. The sun had dipped behind the tree line, casting long shadows across the lot. Inside, the side room was dim. Folding chairs, a little round table with a box fan humming low. And sitting there, Loretta, along with 3 elders I hadn't seen gathered in years. Miss Hazel from the neighborhood committee, old Mr. Benson, used to work county records, and Auntie Myra, who didn't speak much but remembered everything. Loretta stood as I entered. No hugs, just a nod. "Time to end their game, baby," she whispered, sliding a stack of papers across the table. It wasn't loud, no yelling, but my hands were trembling as I reached for those documents. The quiet in that room felt louder than any storm. The first page was a property deed, my name on it, not Marcus, not Charmaine, mine, paid in full. Another page, permits for house renovations, receipts with my signature. Then a letter, dated 3 years back, confirming a trust was set up, solely in my name. Then a voicemail. Loretta had saved it from her old answering machine. Marcus's voice, younger then. "We'll fix the paperwork later, Mama. Just help us get it started." That later never came. I felt every betrayal in those pages, not just their lies, but the planning behind it. They took my silence for permission. A flash came back. Marcus at 22, crying on my couch, saying he just needed a start. Me pulling savings out of a jar under the sink. No paperwork. Just a mother's trust. I didn't cry in that room. I didn't yell. I just said, "Print me everything." 2 days later, I was at the bank. Miss Eunice, retired now but still sharp, met me at her desk in the back. I handed her the documents. "I need 10 years of transfers," I said. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and printed. Page after page, lines of deposits marked House Trust Actee. Regular as rent. Out of my pension, out of my Social Security. I hadn't just funded the house, I'd maintained it. Miss Eunice looked up. "They never told you?" "No," I said. "But now I know." And right there, I understood. This wasn't about bad decisions. This was theft. Planned, dressed up in family smiles, hidden behind, "Yes, ma'am," and "We love you, Mama." I drove home in silence, documents on the seat beside me like quiet witnesses. My heart didn't race. It settled. Calm, cold, ready. That Sunday, I sent a text. Dinner, 7 p.m. My house. Nothing else. They came. Of course they did. Charmaine in high heels and too much perfume. Marcus looking annoyed, like his time was more valuable than air. They walked into the dining room and stopped. I was already seated at the head of the table. All white dress, nothing fancy, just clean, steamed, pressed. Papers were stacked neatly in front of me. Charmaine laughed nervously. "What's all this, Mama?" I didn't answer, just slid the top document toward them. Marcus picked it up, read a few lines, then dropped it like it was hot. Charmaine reached for the next one. The trust filing. Her face turned from confused to pale. "You lied," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did." Silence filled the room like smoke. "You live in it. I built it. Tomorrow, you leave it." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the documents, then at me. Charmaine whispered, You wouldn't— Oh, I already did. I stood, calm as I'd ever been. And when the sheriff knocks, tell him Mama said hello. Morning light spilled through white curtains like a blessing, soft and clean. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Waking up without tension clamped in my chest, no one stomping through the hallway, no doors slamming with entitlement. Just me, in a quiet apartment, above a little park in the east side of Atlanta. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting my feet touch the cold floor like I was grounding myself back into a life that finally belonged to me. No banging, no whispering behind my back, no pretending. Coffee tasted different now, not rushed, not swallowed between someone else's needs. I held the mug with both hands, warm in my palms, and flipped through a small leather Bible I hadn't touched in years. The quilt over my lap was one I started years ago and only just finished last week. All that time, I kept giving the best parts of me away. Not anymore. It's funny how quiet can sound like freedom when you've known too much noise. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. And finally, I was okay with that. Later that week, I stood in the multi-purpose room at the community center, surrounded by young women, barely 20, some younger, eyes wide as I showed them how to read a credit report. Some fidgeted, some took notes. All of them hungry for a kind of knowledge no one teaches when you're busy surviving. Loretta stopped by toward the end of class, pulled me aside with that sideways smirk of hers and said, "Word's gotten round. They don't see you as just the mama who kicked him out. They see you as the woman who made him stand." I didn't respond, just smiled and packed my folder. A week later, I made a stop I'd been putting off. Gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked through the cemetery, past rows of names and years and plastic flowers. My sister's plot was at the far end, tucked beneath a tall pine. I knelt down, dusted the stone with my sleeve, and set a single yellow daisy on the ledge. "You were right," I whispered. "But I still had to try. She'd warned me, years back. You always giving, but they taking, oh, one day they gon' bleed you dry." I left without tears. Just a full breath, deep and clean. Then came the envelope. Certified. My lawyer had to sign for it. Thick paper, heavy seal. Inside, handwritten in Marcus's uneven print, he said he was sorry. Not for losing the house, not for the shouting, but for never really seeing me. Said his marriage was unraveling, that Charmaine was gone, that he kept looking at old photos and realizing he didn't know who he was without me propping him up. "I thought I was the builder," he wrote, "but I was just living in the walls you laid down." Then, folded inside, was a deed, a small plot of land outside Marietta, titled in my name, no tricks, no catch. "This is yours," he wrote. "No one can take it." I held that paper to my chest and just breathed. I didn't cry because I was hurt. I cried because I'd stopped waiting for apologies, stopped waiting for someone to name the pain for me. But still, that letter cracked something open, and for once, it didn't pour out shame. It poured out peace. One afternoon, I walked down to the park below my window. The sun was soft, kids screaming and laughing by the swings. I found a bench by the fountain and sat for a while. A young mother sat beside me not long after. 2 kids tugging on her coat, her face weary, edges frayed. She didn't say anything, but I saw it in her eyes. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded slip of paper I'd been carrying for weeks, handed it to her without a word. She opened it, lips moving as she read, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." Maya Angelou, her eyes welled up. She looked at me, and I just nodded. No speeches, no backstories, just one woman letting another know, she ain't alone. And as the breeze lifted my scarf, I realized I was never useless, just unseen.